Hey guys, Ken back out in the garage with another project. Sorry it's been a little while. Today we are converting a Wavesport Project 45 from a kayak into a C1. I've converted many boats over the years and wanted to share the process and talk about some of our options when doing a conversion, and maybe this will help some of you out who are looking to convert your own boat. Let's take a look. Alright, so I have most of the kayaking outfitting removed from this boat, the seat, the thigh hooks, but I did leave in the rail. And that's the first thing I want to talk about, is when choosing to convert a C1, we have to have some kind of rail or backbone in the boat to maintain its structural integrity. One of the reasons that kayak manufacturers won't sell you a C1 hull is because they design the boat, the outfitting in the boat, to add to the structure of the boat itself. I don't know if you've ever seen a canoe wrap around a rock, like a traditional flatwater boat or a john boat or something, but they tend to just collapse around a rock, and you really don't want that to happen with your legs in the boat. So they put this rail in, and then the seat and everything adds to that structure. If we remove that, we have to add our own so that it's safe and this boat won't just taco around a rock from the current. We have a couple options for that. One is to leave the factory rail in. This is designed to be used in conjunction with the seat, and since we did remove the seat, we want to modify this a little bit to maintain some of that rigidity. So one of the first things I like to do before installing the rail is to foam out from in front of my knees to behind my toes, and that way the whole floor has a layer of half-inch foam. Now to do that, I'm using Harbor Freight anti-fatigue mats. This is the cheapest mini cell you can get. It's 4 2x2 tiles, and I believe it's like $10, sometimes $8 with a coupon. I buy this stuff. Every time I'm at Harbor Freight, I probably pick up 2 packets of this. Alright, you'll have to excuse the lawnmowers, but inside here we have about 1 3/4 of a sheet of that foam. I did trim off the extra puzzle pieces just to make it a little bit neater, and I'm just going to use a Sharpie and trace the outline of where I want it in the boat. And now I'm just going to use some rubbing alcohol and clean the surface before applying the glue. For glue, we are using Weldwood contact cement. This is the original. It also comes in a gel. I actually really like the gel, but this is what I have, so this is what we're using it. And to apply it, I'm just using another scrap of that foam, and this is just going to be like a squeegee to spread the glue out on the surface of the hull. I use contact cement for all my foam to hull and foam to foam connections. Alright, you can do this a couple different ways. You can put the contact cement on wet and stick it together, but you have to give it a few days at least for that to set up and glue. The nice thing about that is it allows you to shift the pieces of foam around a little bit, and you have a little bit of movement. The other way to do it is to let both sides tack up, and when we talk about tacky, you want to be able to touch it, and it's sticky, but it doesn't come off and leave residue on your fingers. And then the third way is to let them both dry completely and then activate it with heat. The second and the third way, once you touch them together, there is no movement. That's why it's called contact cement. It sticks on contact with itself. I prefer the second way, so I let them both get tacky and then stick them together. But sometimes you let them sit and they're drying, and if it's cooler or more humid out, they dry all the way, and you have to hit it with a heat gun and then tack them together. The first way is nice for getting pieces in hard to reach places, but honestly, I'm usually outfitting my boat the day before I need to use them, so I don't like to do that because you really need to give that time for the solvents to evaporate and for that glue to stick. Jeremy made an experiment showing that all 3 of them, there's very little difference between them in terms of how you apply them and how strong they are. The key would be if you stick them together wet to give it that time. One more quick note: when you're using contact cement, wear a respirator. It's really gnarly stuff. I'm doing it outside, and definitely wearing a respirator. The more you get exposed to it, the worse it is, and some people have really bad reactions to it. So safety first. But we're going to let this tack up, and I'm going to go spread some on the foam. All right, you can see how the foam absorbs a lot of that stuff. I got a nice coat on the whole thing. I'm gonna let this dry completely, and I'm gonna do a second coat on this, and I'm gonna go check on the boat. All right, we got 2 coats tacky on here. And this is the tricky part because we do not want it to touch until it's in place. You know, we're going to do this in 2 pieces. Ah! Oh, that was close. All right, our foam is glued in along the bottom. Next thing we want to do is put some structure back in the factory rail. Now you can see there's kind of a piece missing where the seat is, and that makes it really flexy. We don't want that flex, obviously, so we go back to Harbor Freight for some aluminum yardsticks. They're like $3 each, and I'm just going to bolt one to each side of the rail, and that's going to make this nice and rigid. Our reinforcements are bolted on the rail. I did that with some fender washers and stainless hardware. I did leave 2 of the bolts open, and I'll talk about that a little bit more when we figure out our straps. But this goes in here. The next thing we want to talk about is our cockpit arrangement. We need to figure out some kind of pedestal to sit on. This is a pedestal from an open boat that's just been cut down for a C1 pedestal, and then this is just using foam as the back band. I'm not going to go too crazy talking about a pedestal because they're pretty simple to make. You just need to glue a couple chunks of foam together as something to sit on. Height for the saddle is kind of personal preference and a comfort issue. Realistically, you want this seat to be even with your center line of the boat, but in actuality most people can't go that low. In slalom boats, those saddles are 2 to 3 inches. They're as low as possible, and what that does is allows your hip snap to pivot the boat instead of arc the boat. The more that you raise it up, when you hip snap, the boat will do this under you instead of just this under you. That comes down to body mobility and how flexible you are. I'm really tall, so even with my legs bent as low as I can go, the meat in my legs will only let me go so far, and that ends up being about 5 to 6 inches. And then that took me a little while, probably 2 years of stretching to get all the way down. This is a 6-inch saddle, and the person paddling this will probably lower it a little bit over time, but 6 is generally a good starting point, but understand that much higher than that is going to cause issues with your hip snap and roll, and lower is going to be a comfort issue and require some extra stretching. That just about covers the saddle. Next, let's talk about leg retention. Let's get serious for a second. Straps are dangerous. There's really no getting around it. By adding any kind of strap system to the boat, we are making the boat more dangerous. There's some things we can do to try and mitigate that risk, but having to pull 2 things instead of 1 thing is a lot more when you need to breathe. So you can sometimes get strap setups that work where you can wiggle out of them without pulling a release or anything, but it's a compromise of retention in the boat. You start to lose some of that attachment to do tricks and stuff when you have that looser strap system or a strap further down your leg. Even with quick releases, any of them, any kind of system or strap system, whether it makes loops in the boat that can trap you as you do wet exit, if you can get out without the release, or if there is some kind of release system. Again, pulling 2 things is a lot more than 1, and there's many situations that kayakers end up where they're pinned and they have to do a side pull on their skirt, or they can't reach their skirt to pull it at all. And when you're in an environment as dynamic as whitewater, if we can envision a situation where you can't pull your skirt,
then there's probably a lot more than the ones that we can envision. And same thing with straps. If you have to pull your skirt and then your straps, and there's situations like your ankle getting twisted in a strap or a loop within the boat, there's probably a lot more that exists than what we are trying to imagine. So whether it's a lap belt, thigh straps, Velcro, quick release, any of these, by adding straps to the boat, it is dangerous.
So on my downriver boat, this is probably my favorite setup. I have thigh straps with a snowboard binding ratchet. I think these are IR back bands, but individual thigh straps that each go through a single D-ring. This redirects the direction so that both straps enter a quick release straight on. One more quick thing to mention about these cam style buckles. They cam shut in this direction. So if you have a really long tail and you release it and this tail is sliding out, there exists the potential for it to actually grab the teeth and pull itself closed. That's even more so the case if you didn't have a redirect and you had two straps going in. As these are pulling out in different directions, they can cross and again kind of jam in there crossed. So whenever you use something like this, you really just want these tails just long enough to have enough to bite onto. You don't want to have long tails that have to slide past all the way out, or these can jam or cam themselves closed. And you can't really use them in the other direction, because if you pull the webbing in this direction, it doesn't actually cam shut. It'll pull itself open when you pull tension on it this way. So just something else to consider. So for this particular boat, we're going to use these snowboard bindings as thigh straps. They already have padding on them. They've got a nice adjustable strap on this side, so I can use any of the factory holes to mount to. And there's some adjustment there, and then it has the ladder strap on the other side. I'm going to mount a D-ring in the middle, and then our quick release in front of it. And then obviously this strap will go through the D-ring and connect to the bottom end of this ladder strap. So I need to burn a hole in here to attach it to this, and I need to sew up some little loops on here and on the back of here. And I'm going to be using a threaded rod through the holes that I left open there and there to go through this loop and this loop. And hopefully that makes sense as it comes together. And then just burn it through. When I was done burning the hole, I took the blowtorch and just glazed the outside, and that kind of fuses the fibers together so that the hole can't tear out as much. To fasten it to the ladder strap, I can use these post nuts, and you can get these in all sorts of sizes, or a T-nut. And this is a T-nut with teeth. This would basically be a wood insert. And it's actually what the snowboard bindings use from the factory to mount their hardware. So I'm just going to push it through, and these teeth will bite through the fabric and into the plastic and be very secure. So to mount the buckle on the rail, we're just going to use this threaded rod. It's going to go all the way through, and through that piece that I sewed. I was going to put the D-ring on the front, but I think instead I just cut a piece of PEX and do the same thing, and I use a threaded rod through that as well, and that'll be my redirect. So the thigh straps will come under here and into the buckle. Next thing we need to do is mount the back of the snowboard straps to our factory seat post holes. The seat is obviously not glued in. We're just sticking it in for now. And personally,
I like the center line of the boat, which I have marked here, to be just in front of my hip. So when I'm in here, I could lay a hockey stick right up against my gut and it would touch there and there. And I found that pretty good for most boats, although my Super Easy was actually a solid 1.5 inches forward of that point. So this is going to be a starting point. I'm not actually going to glue the saddle down until he gets it in the water and is able to play with that trim a little bit. These thankfully have an adjustment in the back, so he can move these in and out depending on how much the saddle moves. So before I put these on, the next thing we have to figure out is hip pads. On a boat like the Delirious that has a really low cockpit rim, it actually contacts my thigh and I don't need a hip pad. For all my other boats, I make hip pads. And the way I make these is this is just a piece of plastic from another cracked boat, and I just heat it with a heat gun, bent it over the edge of the table, and then put it in, mark the holes, and drill it. This is going to mount to the same 2 seat holes, so we're not drilling new holes, and then foam will get glued to this. So I'm going to install these with these bolted to the bottom in between. Alright, with our hip pad plastic mount brackets, whatever we want to call them, installed, I put 2 shims on the inside. They're just taped on, and 1 on the outside. And the reason for the 1 on the outside, you can see it's a little bit larger than the plastic itself. It stands a little proud there, and that's so the skirt rubs on the foam and not on the plastic, and the plastic's not wearing through your skirt. These are just temporarily in there because I don't know how it's going to fit the gentleman it's for, as well as the seat is still free to move, though I have it roughly in the place I think it's going to stay. And our straps are all done and mounted as well. In its bare form, this is pretty much done, other than having to glue some stuff down. The only other things I would do is some kind of knee spreader. So these would go in something like that. And that's just going to drive your knees out over the chines of the boat. And then some kind of ankle block. Now, when most people kneel, they can't get their foot flat. So like completely flat like that. And you end up with this void under your ankle. So a lot of times people will shape a piece of foam for your ankle to rest on. And that's a little bit more comfortable. Personally, I use, where are they? These inflatable ones. And these sit down in there. These are from Sean at Fall Line Canoes. And that's like a little airbag for my shin to rest on. The nice thing about the inflatables is that I can basically deflate it until I'm uncomfortable and use it like that for a while. And then once I'm comfortable, I can deflate it a little bit more. And by slowly working my way down, instead of having to glue in different size shims, I can just slowly deflate this. And over the course of a year, eventually end up flat. And then that'll allow me to lower my saddle and be more comfortable as well. Again, I don't know how this gentleman's going to fit, so I am not gluing in any hip pads, ankle blocks, the saddle, or these knee wedges, but I will let him do that. Oh, just something real quick. The hip pads, if you wanted, you could use factory Kayak hip pads on there as well. But these are from another boat, and save those. And for now, we're just going to use some 1/2 inch shims. I hope you guys enjoyed this project. I hope it was informative for those of you looking to convert your own boat. Please leave a comment if there's anything I missed or if you have any questions. And I'll catch you guys next time.